What is up, family? We are back with our podcast after the message, and I am so honored to have with us today the LB, Pastor Larry. That's right, you get the.
Is that like the Ohio State?
Wow, better than that because Ohio State ain't winning. But I'm just joking. Sorry, the Pastor Larry Brey, who needs no introduction, from one of the greatest churches on planet Earth, under the leadership of Pastor Stephen Furtick, Elevation Church. Come on, give it up for Pastor Larry Brey, who we spent today. You've been pouring into our staff. And I just want to say from the bottom of our heart, thank you for being so generous with what God has done in your life. Obviously, the supernatural move of God that Elevation Church is, such an inspiration to the church around the world. The incredible preacher Pastor Stephen is. I mean, you guys have just a healthy team. And for you to pour into our team today has been so amazing. But I don't want to hold it just for us. I know there might be people going to listen to this and want to grow and build their team. And so today we were talking about stretching. Hello. And you came in and just did this analogy. Don't stretch me out, okay? But you did this whole analogy with our team. He literally got one of our staff members, put him on the ground, and started stretching him out. Yeah. And it was so brilliant. It was spontaneous. It was awesome, man. But this year, I just felt that God was going to stretch us. And would you share a little bit about, about letting God stretch us? Out of Isaiah 54, enlarge the place of your tent. He says, stretch wide. And the key to doing more sometimes is being stretched.
Yeah.
Break it down.
The whole stretching.
Yeah.
Like, do you like stretching?
Well, it hurts.
Well, often people only choose stretching because they have to. Because when you're younger, you can just roll in the gym.
Yeah.
You can throw up some weight.
Yeah.
But then as you get a little bit older, things don't work quite the same way. You realize, I've been neglecting one of the major areas that I should have been developing. So I got my physical, my strength, muscular strength. I got my cardiovascular fitness. But you ever seen an 80-year-old who shouldn't be driving a car because they can't
That's right, they're stuck.
They can't turn. They have no flexibility. They can't.
Right.
Because they've never stretched that part of their life.
So true. Yeah.
Often we'll wait to get to the point that it's detrimental before we even start addressing it.
Wow. And I love how you started saying that in order for you to stretch, you need to apply some pressure.
Oh, man. Well, so the analogy, you couldn't see it, but it was fun.
Picture it. Okay.
Took one of his staff and laid him on the ground, and you grab his leg and you lift it up to see his hamstring flexibility. Yeah. And he got to about 45 degrees, and things are popping and snapping, and usually at that point we stop because we're going, oh, stop, that hurts.
Right, it hurts.
It hurts.
Yeah.
But there's no stretch.
Right.
And so we'll often stop at a place of discomfort, and there's no growth in that space.
Hello.
But once I put a little bit of pressure on him, trained hands, I've done it for a long time, and you give him a little bit more force and a little bit more pressure and apply a little bit more, and you get him to actually push against it to get the muscle engaged a little bit.
Yeah.
We ended up actually doubling his flexibility.
Right. I think he was doing the splits by the end of the meeting. Pastor Tom was doing the splits, and I'm joking.
But the physical is such a great picture for the spiritual.
So true.
You are capable of so much more.
Come on.
How many times do we quit because it became a little hard? It hurt a little bit.
Right.
But because we were unflexible, we were unyielding, we didn't let ourselves go through it.
Wow. That is so true because it's our natural propensity that whenever we feel pain, we push away.
Totally.
Wait a minute. This ain't comfortable. How could it possibly be good for me?
This doesn't feel good. How could this help me?
Right. But it was so brilliant how you did that, spirit-led, if you have you. But because that was what I felt I'm kind of combating this whole thought process of, I feel stretched. And we use that as an excuse to shrink.
Totally.
And my whole thing that I was telling our team, and I believe it's for anybody who wants to grow the kingdom, is I'm saying I want to flip that and say, maybe stretch doesn't mean weakness. Maybe stretch is when you're the strongest.
Totally.
Like a rubber band, it does its best work when it's stretched.
Yes.
Like a bow and arrow, it shoots furthest when it's stretched. And I'm just saying, what if God wanted to stretch us to bring more out of us, and we shouldn't fight that stretch? And why do you think, though, LB, we fight the stretch sometimes when God applies that pressure?
Yeah. So everybody watching the podcast, type in the comments if you're going to put some comments.
Let me know. Yeah.
What was your word for 2024?
We'll hear everybody else's words, but our word is kingdom expansion.
Expansion.
Hey.
Oh, that feels good, doesn't it?
It feels great.
We're going for more in 24. Glory to glory, strength to strength.
Yeah.
So the pictures we paint of a future we want all have certain colors.
Right.
They got certain sounds. But when we encounter something that does not look like what we thought it would be, we will always reject it and resist it. So did anybody pick a word for 2024? Suffering?
Nope.
Did anybody pick a word that challenge or
That's so good.
scarcity?
Right.
Wilderness.
Wow. Hey.
So when we are wanting a future of glory to glory, strength to strength, but now you start giving me some resistance, you start creating some personal pain.
Yeah.
Of course I'm going to withdraw from that because that's not what I thought I signed up for.
Wow.
I thought it
So
meant
good.
that, gosh, we're going to get better and we're going to grow. And somebody listening to this podcast is going like, sure, it must be really easy for you, LB. Look at the church you're a part of and all the campuses, blah, blah, blah. But we'll be I'm not sure when people listen to this. At the beginning of February, we'll celebrate 18 years of ministry.
Wow.
So when my wife and I signed up for this thing 18 years ago, I remember hearing that Pastor Stephen had invited the first couple to join them. I pulled him in the office. We were on staff together at a church previous to this. And I said, Pastor Stephen, I hear you're getting ready to launch this thing called, we didn't even have a name. I didn't even have a name. But
It was just a new thing.
I'm coming with. And he kind of looked at me and he's like, you're coming with. He said, all right, if you want to do that, means you need to sell your house, quit your job, move to an unnamed city in an unnamed part of the country to be part of an unnamed church. You'll never get a paycheck. You'll never be on staff. Are you in?
What a pitch.
And I'm like, absolutely. Who wouldn't want to do that?
Wow. My God.
And then I had to go home and told my wife.
Oh, okay.
And she said, heck no.
You out your mind. Yeah.
But it was a stretch. But the blessing everybody sees always begins with sacrifices nobody sees.
Wow.
And when we're unwilling to embrace the stretch, we forfeit the blessing that somebody else is supposed to be sitting in.
God. The blessings that we're going to see is on the sacrifices.
It is.
Man, I thought you said something that is powerful, but you said something today that I thought was like brilliant. And you said oftentimes we have a perception of the promised land that doesn't involve a wilderness. Boom. Just put boom in the comment. Boom. We have a perception of a promised land that involves no wilderness.
Yeah.
What are we talking about?
Well, it's the journey of Jesus. I'm studying in the book of Mark. I'm leading a bunch of our staff through it. And you have this scene that heaven's open and God speaks down in his son and the Spirit descends and the voice rings out, this is my son in whom I'm well pleased.
Wow.
What a beautiful picture of what God says about us.
Yeah.
The next scene in the first act of Mark is now the same Spirit leading him into the wilderness. So there's this countercultural picture that Jesus is painting of the kingdom that does not look like traditional systems of the world.
Wow.
The traditional systems of the world is this plus this equals this. My hard work plus God's blessing equals the promised land.
Let's go.
What if my hard work plus God's blessing equals the wilderness? That math just doesn't compute in our heads.
Right.
And so Jesus is led into the wilderness for 40 days. 40 days of being tested by his father and being tempted by Satan. Was he being tested or being tempted?
Bible says both.
Both.
Yeah.
And it's in that juxtaposition of our faith that I could be in the driest season of my life and have the greatest gratitude for my Lord.
My God.
You want to talk about a stretching?
Yeah.
To not pray that God would take me out of it, but for me to have joy in it. You want to talk about stretching?
Yeah.
To remain with your feet planted when you want to run.
Right.
You want to talk about a stretch.
Yeah, come on. Yeah,
But the picture of the promised land will often paint is, you know
Yeah.
what? If you just trust God, your church is going to grow and you'll see 1,000 by the end of the year.
Bang.
What if you see 50?
I call it a Gideon revival.
And so Jesus sends the disciples out by 2 in Mark, and they go do their miracles and healing sick people and driving out demons. They come back to Jesus, report all these things, and then Jesus says, hey, let's take you across the lake to get some rest. Let's do a lake retreat. You know? He says, let's go to a quiet, solitary place. Uses rest and solitary. I wonder what picture was painted in the disciples' heads. As they're picturing, they're exhausted, they're tired, they're hungry. And they're Jesus like, let's go get some rest. And in their head, they're like, it's going to be a B&B. I'm just going to sit out on the dock, put my feet in the water. And they get to the other side, and by then the crowds had gathered on the other side of the lake. And Jesus starts teaching them, and it gets late. And they're like, send the people away because we're tired and we're hungry. We came for some rest. And then Jesus says, you give them something. But when you really study the text, the language of Jesus being driven into the wilderness by the Holy Spirit, wilderness, is the same word that Jesus used to describe rest and a solitary place to his disciples.
Wow.
He said, I'm taking you to the wilderness.
Wow.
That
The same way Jesus.
same way Jesus did. So why would we think the training ground for a calling would be any different?
Because God loves me.
Yeah.
He disciplines those he loves.
And the voice from heaven said, this is my son in whom I'm well pleased.
That is so rich, LB.
Doesn't it mess with our theology, though?
100%. It messes with our theology, our perception.
Yes.
It messes with our comfort. And I loved how you started breaking down to our team, and again, so brilliantly and profoundly about how we all know it, but I think we just read over it where it says, deny yourself.
Deny yourself.
Talk a little bit about that, about how sometimes as, maybe someone watching this, you're a volunteer, you're just trying to serve God, or you're on staff, you're a pastor, I don't know, your respective application, but talk a little bit about how we could just read over the denying part.
Yeah.
Because he said that was the fundamental, right? Pick up your cross and deny yourself and follow me.
So a couple of weeks ago, I'm talking with a church planner who's been doing it for about 18 months. And he's at the point, he's like, I think I just missed it. I don't think I heard God right. I'm like, well, talk me through the story. It's been hard, got multiple facilities, people have walked away, and it's just been a hard season. Okay. But what it made him do is like, maybe I missed the calling. And what it made him fantasize about doing is moving his feet. Because I don't know if I want this pain anymore. I don't know if this is what I signed up for anymore. Wow. But when we paint a picture like, hey, if you just do these 5 tips and tricks, you too can bust through that barrier. And we sell a cheap faith. We sell a really cheap version.
Growth in a bottle.
And but with Jesus, as he's looking at his disciples, and on the second time, he tells them, like, I'm going to go to the cross. He predicts his death a second time. He introduces the cross first time in the Gospel of Mark. And the disciples would have understood this was a Roman torture device.
Right.
They would have been intimately aware of what he's describing, and Jesus is saying, that's my destiny. Wow. But then when we read back to Isaiah chapter 53, it was God's will to crush his son.
Wow. Yeah.
It was God's. Yeah. And Jesus knew it. And yet he denied himself. Right. And then he turns to the disciples and says, do you realize that's your future as well?
Let's go. Wow.
So the cross is waiting for you. And if anyone would, if you want to be my disciple, deny yourself. Right. And pick that up and follow me.
My God.
But we don't talk a lot about denial. We don't talk a lot about sacrifice. We don't talk a lot about submission. We'll talk about stats. We'll talk about systems. We'll talk about structures. Yeah. But I think for anybody out there who's in a season of, this didn't look like what I thought it would be. I'm really sorry you're looking at those things.
That's great. Yeah.
But my faith would be not that God would get you out of it, but that you would realize that he's in it with you.
That is so good.
And that wilderness season might just be the place of your greatest revelation. And the fruit that is formed in that season will be what feeds people when there's a famine in the land.
My God. The wilderness is where you get the revelation.
The wilderness.
Not sometimes we say in our rest.
In our rest.
I need a rest.
What Jesus said,
Which full disclosure, take your vacation, right? Like we're not telling you to overwork yourself to the point where you're burning the candle on both ends. You go ahead and you make sure that you have, take your vacation. You need it because you're starting to look like your driver's license picture. Okay, so go ahead. We're not talking about that, so don't misinterpret what I'm saying. What we are saying is when it's time to work, it's time to work. And Jesus wasn't like, I'm going to take you on this Airbnb, in your words, to have, this relaxing time, and then we're just going to get a revelation. No, he was like, I'm going to apply some pressure.
Was Jesus lying to them?
No,
it's inconsistent. He cannot lie.
Can't lie.
He is truth.
Yeah.
So when he says, let's go get some rest on the other side, he was not lying.
No.
But he's also omnipotent. Did he know what was waiting for them on the other
100%.
side? 100%.
Yeah.
So maybe he's got a different definition of rest.
Hello, somebody.
You mean they're at a place where they're exhausted and they're tired and they're hungry. They have nothing.
Yeah.
And Jesus calls that rest. And he says, now feed them. That's rest.
So
that
good.
does not compute with our modern contextualized version of a calling.
Right.
I think the reality is most of us, some people walk away because of a calling because it's uncomfortable, it's inconvenient. Because a calling never shows up at a time that's convenient for us.
Right.
And so the disciples are like, Jesus, it's getting late. It's inconvenient. Send them away.
Right. And he says, you feed them.
He
gave them a dilemma.
They're in the wilderness. There's no Jack in the Box open.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so he forced them to say, now I need you to give something that you inherently don't have yourself.
Right. And then he went and found the 5 loaves, 2 fishes. Jesus multiplies it, and now they have a revelation, right? That God is the miracle worker. Whatever dilemma we're in, you don't have to give up. And I love that perspective because I think it challenges us. And obviously, your house, the house that you're in, Elevation, Pastor Stephen loves to bring the tension of the scriptures, and same with you. I love the revelation. You guys are y'all anointed over there. I called them the innovators of the kingdom. Elevation Church, y'all are like the Apple. I jokingly said today, you guys are probably working on some type of AI or something. They're like, actually, we are. I'm like, I knew you are something. I don't know what they're doing. Holograms. Who knows what they're gonna do? But it's like what I love about the tension of that is that we often, the way we see it is not the way it is. There's things that we just somehow grab a hold to, but God wants to flip it on us. And I'm after that in this year. Where I'm like, we know this to be true. Like this is true in the most practical sense. We know, like, if I go to the gym and I don't push myself, I'm not gonna get in shape.
Yep.
But when it comes to God, it's like, don't push me. I don't want to push myself. Well, then you ain't gonna grow spirit. You ain't gonna stretch. Like hello, somebody. You know what I mean? And you're right. We come up with these idioms and all these things that are just all they're doing is limiting, shrinking.
They're cliches.
Cliches.
They sound good, but they live horribly.
They sound good, but they live horribly.
The problem with the disciples is spiritual blindness. And Jesus is indicting them. He's like, guys, do you still not see? Do you still not remember? Do you still not hear? It's a spiritual blindness. So much so that in the second act, I'm just loving the book of Mark.
So good.
They turn south towards Jerusalem, and the second act begins. There's a blind man that gets healed. And then right before Jesus goes to Jerusalem, there's another blind man that's healed. Those stories are not there by coincidence. It's to illustrate the spiritual blindness that disciples were walking with.
Hello.
And sometimes it's because they're so close to it, they can't see it. Sometimes they're so committed to what they thought it would look like. I thought the Messiah would show up on a horse with his shirt off and a big old sword and destroy the Romans. And,
Yeah.
But sometimes it's a willful ignorance because I don't want to know anymore.
Come on.
And they were afraid to ask.
Yeah.
Not because they were afraid of Jesus. They were afraid of hearing more about what he really had in store that did not line up with what they thought it would look like.
Come on. That is so good. Man, well, we got a few more minutes left here. And here's what I'm going to tell all y'all. if there's anything I can tell you, is always put yourself in a position, if you're watching this, of a learner.
Yeah.
Be like, there's so much to learn and to progress. And if you find yourself in a season of stretch, don't fight the stretch.
No.
Because if you allow God, he'll stretch you till you're stronger.
Yes.
If you allow God, he'll stretch you until you become the version that God sees you becoming. And I don't know any other way. I don't know how God can grow us in comfort.
Yes.
He can only grow us in the stretch. Final thoughts, LB, and then we'll bless the people. Any final thoughts?
And for anybody listening to this, what I'm going to encourage you with is find a coach.
So good.
Find someone who can help you stretch. Now, even get more specific. You really want to walk up this thing called a calling. I mentioned this earlier today. Yeah. I don't think people walk away because they don't care. I think people walk away because they don't know how to carry.
My God.
And there's a burden, there's a calling that God placed you in that city. He placed you in that community so that he would get glory and many would call upon him. He did not promise it would be easy. He promised he'd be with you. So that stretch, when it comes along, who can be there? Who can I turn to help me? So what I felt like my job was just to come in and be a coach from the outside saying, guys, you can do it. You're capable of more. You can do hard things. So when I grabbed Tom's leg and he can only bring it up 45 degrees, it hurt.
Yeah.
But I said, I love you too much to leave you limited. You need a coach who won't leave you limited.
Yeah.
But I needed to push.
Right.
Where do you need to be stretched? Emotionally? Some of you are emotionally fragile because you've never actually dealt with the emotional issue and baggage you've been carrying.
Go there.
Maybe it's stretching relationally. And you're afraid of asking your wife how you're really doing because she might just tell you, I don't know if we're supposed to do this.
Man.
Maybe you need to be stretched as a parent because your kids are jealous of the church because you're parenting them and you're checking on them, on the kids. Maybe it's financially.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe it's with your preaching. I don't know.
Yeah. Right.
So rather than feel overwhelmed everywhere, what's one area that you can be stretched in?
Right.
Who's somebody, Holy Spirit, speak to that person right now.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And help them identify a coach right now that could step into that space and help them through it.
Good. So good. Thank you, LB, for taking some time. Come on, put some clap emojis in the comments. Love y'all so much. Thanks for spending some time with us. Make sure to press the like button, subscribe to the channel, wherever it is you're watching this. Hit the bell icon so you can be notified whenever we drop some new content. I'm telling you, I'm so privileged to have some of the greatest friends that are wise beyond my years, and I want to share them with all of y'all. Love y'all. We believe in you. Don't fight the stretch. See you on the next one. Love ya. Bye.